I decided to wear my John Cena shirt today because, much like Bigfoot and John Cena, you can't see them.
Oh,
So there's that.
all right.
Are
I
we
think
we ready?
that I'm ready. I
All
think
right.
so.
So I know I told you about it. What was it? 2 weeks ago. But the FBI released their file on Bigfoot, right? So
Hmm.
that's what kind of prompted that and spammed off. Spammed off wanted to hear about Bigfoot, but
Yeah.
we were already talking about it prior to spammed off mentioning it. Um, but you wanted to talk a little bit about the history of Bigfoot first before we dive into the FBI thing. So do you want to start us
Well,
off with that?
yeah. Well, I mean, even before that, so I mean, you sent me that information, and when we first started doing these, I guess, conspiracy theory slash myth slash legend
Mm-hmm.
talks. Um, I don't know, Bigfoot and aliens were kind of off the docket because they didn't really seem that interesting to me, I guess. Maybe it's
There's
just
so
because,
much out there.
yeah, they're so prominent. It's kind of
Right.
like the bread and butter of conspiracy theories,
Right.
right?
Right.
So, um, but after you sent that link, it just, I kind of dove into it and read more about Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and even went into, I guess, like ape-like creatures.
Mm-hmm.
Because really, all over the world, there are similar stories of these, I guess ape-like creatures that, walk on two legs. There's a ton of names for them in a ton of different countries. So it's kind of interesting. I know that you know to me, Bigfoot seemed played out a little bit, I guess, but maybe it's just because I hadn't ever done, my due diligence in researching it.
Right. I mean, I agree with you, and that's coming from someone who's like actually interested in Bigfoot. Now I don't go looking for him or read all every single newspaper clipping about him, but I think it's a fun thing to talk about because I find it interesting that all over the world, like you said, all over the world they have different names for him. They have different stories that have been passed down from generation to generation about him, whether it's Bigfoot or the abominable snowman or the Yeti or the orang pendek in Sumatra. I mean, even within the United States, there's different names for Bigfoot. I mean, you got the stink ape, you got,
Wait,
um,
what?
yeah, you
Where did
didn't.
that come from?
It's stink ape is I think like Texas, Arkansas area.
Oh, really?
I think so.
Oh,
Um,
I was just looking at like the kind of typical Northwest,
Skunk ape. I'm sorry,
Sasquatch
skunk ape,
Bigfoot.
and it's Florida, Louisiana. I was close. It was
Oh,
south.
really?
Yeah. Not even that, but in Missouri we have our own version of Bigfoot, quote unquote Bigfoot, known as Momo the monster. And you laugh, but the stories that people have said about Momo the monster are uh, far scarier, creepier than your typical Bigfoot encounter. Um,
Hmm.
it's more along the lines of he's like a rabid animal, and he like actively tries to hurt people or cause chaos. Um,
So he's more of
so
like an evil spirit creature.
kind of, I mean, it's I mean, it's I don't know. That's just what we believe in Missouri is that they're out in the wilderness. There's something called Momo the monster. It even went
Yeah,
so
there's
far as to Six Flags St. Louis. I, we all know Six Flags probably. It's a huge
mhm.
amusement park all over there's a bunch of locations all over the country. Um, Six Flags St. Louis used to have a swing ride, right? The ones that go around in circles or whatever.
Mhm.
And it used to be called Momo the Monster. And then something happened and it broke, and then they changed the name of it. So, whatever.
Interesting. Yeah, I think I came across a term, and I haven't done a lot of digging into it, but I
Mhm.
think it kind of describes all of these creatures as anomalous apes.
Yeah, I read that and
So,
it makes sense.
yeah, it's just like this catch-all term for any sort of unknown ape-like creature, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, which is pretty fitting, um, if we can all agree that they're ape-like creatures, right? And we can't pinpoint where they come from or whether they actually exist. Obviously, they would be an anomaly because the few times that people have actually done research into like the hair samples or any of that stuff, it's like, well, we don't know where this came from. So it really fits when you think of it like that. Um,
Yeah.
but
It's sort of interesting from a, um, I guess, environmental perspective because there actually aren't any known apes in North America.
mhm,
So when you talk about Bigfoot or Sasquatch or any of these other more local ape creatures,
mhm.
sort of like maybe I don't know, maybe those are our, you know, apes, North American apes. I don't know.
Could very well be. I mean, I think one of the longest like excuses or whatever you want to call it, to discredit Bigfoot was that something escaped from the zoo, you know, and like it escaped from the zoo and it's now living amongst the wild, and that's what people are seeing. And I mean, I guess that could be true, but is it really like migrating that much, that it's across the country that people are seeing this thing? I don't know.
Well, I mean, there are also stories though that date back to, I mean, pre, colonization,
For sure.
Native American stories about creatures in the woods,
Hmm.
and kids were told not to go out at night. I know that during the earlier what I forgot what year it is. I think it was shortly after kind of colonization started.
Hmm.
There were stories of people who saw the same creatures. There is one guy, I'll have to dig up the name. But there's one guy who even said he got kidnapped by a Sasquatch and like lived with the Sasquatch family for a week before he escaped.
That's awesome.
And it took him 20 years to tell anyone because he thought people would think he's crazy. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, but he's not wrong, Uh, that's that's part of the reason that I enjoy doing these conspiracy theories is that I I don't necessarily subscribe to them, but I think they're fun to think about. And so when you tell people, oh, I talk about conspiracy theories, you know, every other week, they're like, well, what are you smoking? Like what kind of drugs are you doing that you believe all these? I don't necessarily believe them, but it's kind of weird for even me to say, hey, listen to my conspiracy theory podcast because you know people are like, okay, well, this guy's a nut job. So if he were to say, hey, look, I lived with Bigfoot and the Bigfoot family uh, for a week, absolutely
And
people
no,
would think he's crazy.
not only Bigfoot, but his entire
An
family.
entire
So
family of Bigfoot. I like to picture the mama Bigfoot wearing like an apron, and she's like serving them, like bugs on a tree branch or something.
I think in the article I was reading, they had a picture that accompanied it that was like this log. It was like this wood table with stumps for seats, and they had like just these like 4 or 5 Sasquatch sitting at a table.
Like the
But the
most.
guy, the guy was Albert Ostman, and
Okay.
so this supposedly took place in 1924. So he was a Canadian prospector who said he was abducted by Sasquatch and held captive for 6 days. So
Okay. Okay.
yeah,
Canadian. Look at that.
yeah.
Canadian. Hmm.
So yeah, it's it's let's see. I have some more detail that I didn't read in the article, but I think this is interesting. So it says, um, So he was held captive. There were three adults and a child. One of the Bigfoots was reportedly as tall as 8 feet, possibly more. Um, he did not use his gun on them, and they did no harm. He stayed with the family for a week, and he ate sweet tasting grass that they gave him.
All right, sure.
So I don't know. There's a whole Wikipedia article about it, but it's I don't know. There's more detail if anyone's interested in hearing about Albert Ostman's week-long Sasquatch stay.
The part of that I find interesting is that he signed a solemn declaration that his story about the Sasquatch was true under oath. Like the Canadian government recognizes it as it's true because he signed an oath. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
like that's pretty interesting that they would be like, okay, well, sign this if you really think it. And he's like, all right, sure, bet. Huh. Interesting.
I don't know. I mean, the problem I have with that is obviously there are known hoaxes where, people have been tricked and,
Hmm.
10, 20, 30 years later, the person who put on the hoax will say, "Oh yeah, actually."
Yeah.
I know it's been 30 years, but yeah, it was all a joke.
Yeah, I mean that's actually the thought process behind the dude, I'm gonna forget it. The Patterson film? Is that the name of it? The it's
Patterson.
like the most well known video of Bigfoot.
Oh yeah, yeah. See, that
Peterson or
one
something like
was
that, right?
in the 1960s, I
Yeah.
believe, late 1960s, which kind of started the whole Sasquatch like phenomenon in the
Right.
United States.
Right. Well, uh they so they the video comes out and then years later, like 30 or 40 years later, this guy comes out and he's like, "Hey, look, I was in the Bigfoot suit, you know?"
Hmm.
And he's like, "Yeah, it was all a big fake and, all this, stuff." But he's like, "I was in the suit, so I know it's fake." But at that point you're kind of like it's like a he said she said thing.
Hmm.
So you can't discredit the people that saw Bigfoot without also being able to discredit the ones that say they were Bigfoot in those hoaxes. Like
Yeah.
because he like pulled out the suit and he's like, "Well, this is what it was," and it's like a ghillie suit, like that you would see like military snipers use in Call of Duty. Um,
Hmm.
and so it doesn't really look like the doesn't look like a Bigfoot. It just looks like a suit with leaves all over it. Um,
Yeah.
but so like at that, like I said, at that point, it's like a he said she said, and you can't really. I would say take both observations with a grain of salt. Is all
Mhm.
know.
Well, I mean, that video is still being debated. I mean, even after that guy coming out, I mean, I think there are people who still think this could be real. I mean, I guess it hasn't been fully proven fake. I don't know. I don't know. It's very strange.
Yeah, and
But
go ahead.
but that video kind of birthed the famous Sasquatch pose, like where he's in mid stride and
Yeah,
like looking back at the camera. That I'm sure
I
everyone's
love
seen it.
that. I love that pose. I love it.
Yeah.
It's so goofy when you see that video. Like it's I don't know. It's just it makes me laugh. Like, what are you looking at, dude? Take like
Yeah.
leave me alone. I'm just minding my own business. Leave me alone.
Well, I actually saw the full video for the first time. I guess for some reason I just thought it was a photo. Didn't realize that there's a full video behind it. So the full video is um, was neat to watch, I thought. But it does like it raised some questions personally for me. Just like if I were to see the video and someone told me it was real, I'd be like, I don't
Is
know.
is
There's
that the
questions
one?
here. There's questions.
Is that the one? I forget. That's like it's a lot longer than just seeing him like across that clearing with that stride like you were talking about. But like they're like tracking it for a while. They're tracking him for a while, right? Like, is that the
Or
same one?
maybe. I saw the full clip of it walking through the clearing. So
Okay.
that's the only part of it I saw.
Okay. Well, I know there's a couple famous videos out there, and one of them is the Patterson film. Patterson or Peterson, I can't remember exactly. But one of them is that,
Patterson. Yeah.
and then there's a second one that I know of. But one of the two, they're like track. There's like it's like a 17-minute long video, like that they had to like they had to use modern technology to restore the film, I guess.
Mhm.
And it's mostly just woods. I mean, it's mostly just woods and fallen trees and rocks and stuff like that. But they're like tracking this thing that they see, they get a brief glimpse of at the beginning, and then they track it over the course of, like I said, about 17 minutes or so. And it ends with that clip of him walking across the clearing with that long stride and everything like that. But it so like they catch a glimpse of him like crossing a stream, and then he like disappears into the forest and they keep going and stuff like that. It's just it's a very interesting video that I feel like would take a lot to hoax it.
Mhm.
Not to say that it's 100% real. I'm not sure what I believe about that video, but
Yeah.
it just seems like an awful lot of work to go through in the 60s to recreate or to falsify that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So that was maybe something different than the Patterson
Maybe.
footage, or you think it was the same?
I I wish I
Let's see.
I wish I
So
knew.
the Patterson film, it says it's 1 minute. So
Okay.
I think that is just literally
There's
a clip of
definitely
it.
a second
Yeah.
video out there. Maybe it starts with a G. Can't remember. I can't remember.
Well, if you remember, well, we can take a look at it. The It's funny, the Roger Patterson video actually has its own IMDb entry.
Of course it does. Yeah, absolutely.
And it gets a 7.5 out of 10 for anyone who's interested.
All right. Does it have the cast as Bigfoot? Because that would be great.
Let me see. Um, no. Oh, no, it just has Roger Patterson as
Okay,
the narrator.
that's sad. I really wished it would be
Yeah.
like actor Bigfoot. Um,
It's got the directors too. The directors are the two guys who made it.
right, sure. Um, I can't remember, but yeah. I mean, there's been a couple videos out there. There's been a couple uh, footprints that have been quote unquote found, um, hair samples and stuff like that. And I think the interesting thing is that you know, even if you like you said before, all right, this has been going back since like pre-colonization times. And that's a long time to keep up a charade. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like even from the 60s until now is what 60, 70 or 50 years,
Hmm.
right? 50, 60 years, something like that. Like
60,
that's a
yeah.
long time to be keeping up a hoax. And it just I don't see what the benefit would be from creating a hoax. That would I don't understand the benefit of creating a hoax in the 60s and keeping that going for 60 years. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you mean in terms of the people who created these videos?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I
mean, I think the only thing I would think of is that basically the more time that passes, the harder it would be to come out that saying it was a hoax. You know what I mean? Like, I don't
I
know.
get you. I get you.
I think that some people would be afraid of the backlash of saying it's a hoax.
Could be. Could be. I think but here's the thing is though, so it's like it seems to go through surges, right? Right? Where like people claim to see Bigfoot a lot and then it kind of like falls off for a while, and then there's more, and then it falls off, and then there's more. And so I think that then is, it's almost like, what would be the purpose of keeping it at the front of the news sphere, right? Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
yeah,
And so, because you know, every time, I mean, I guess theoretically, it could be so that your video or your picture or whatever gets more views by the resurgence of Bigfoot sightings. So then people go do research and they're like, oh man, I found this 1962 picture of Bigfoot. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
I guess that could theoretically be the reason. Um,
yeah.
I don't know. I don't know.
Well, regardless of the validity of Roger Patterson's video, it definitely, like we mentioned before, spurred a huge Bigfoot craze in the 70s. And this is kind of a good segue, I think, into the FBI information that was recently released, because this actually started way back in the 70s.
I'm totally down for that.
Yeah.
Um, so
So,
go
oh,
ahead.
I was just gonna say, so the that video inspired um, the person who started this FBI file, I guess technically,
Mm.
but Peter Byrne. So Peter Byrne, Bigfoot enthusiast, believer, is what started this all.
Hmm. So for anyone who does not know, we mentioned FBI and Bigfoot because recently the FBI released 22 pages of information regarding Bigfoot. Now, that doesn't really sound interesting, doesn't sound intriguing until you realize that the FBI doesn't really, they don't usually release documents to the public unless the documentation is on something that's dead. So, that would bring us to current times when the FBI has released this information to us, and now it basically means, theoretically, that Bigfoot was probably real and he's now dead. Let that sink in.
Maybe.
Theoretically, theoretically,
Potentially.
potentially. However, there is 22 pages. It's very easy to find. I read through it earlier today. It's kind of boring, I'll be honest, because a lot of the 22 pages is just like newspaper clippings that they have photocopied into their files. Um, but there are various letters of correspondence between seemingly two parties. One that wants them to um, do a research analysis on like hair that had been found that was theoretically Bigfoot's, and then correspondence back like, "Hey, uh, this hasn't been done. I don't know why." Things like that. Um, but it's it's interesting that now they're releasing this stuff. Um, and it was actually like last year that they did it, almost
Yeah, it's
this
like
time last year.
2019.
Yeah,
Yeah.
almost this time last year. Um, Never mind. I won't get into it. But go on. You can say something now.
No, yeah, I mean, after reading more about the context of the FBI file,
Hmm.
I because that's the first thing you told me, right? Is that the FBI doesn't release something unless the person or the subject or whatever it is dead. So I was like, man, this is like what's going on? Why I My first thought was, why aren't more people talking about this? But maybe they were. If it was last year, maybe I just wasn't in the Sasquatch loop at the time.
You weren't,
But
clearly.
they weren't.
You weren't.
Oh no, no. But so the person that the FBI was in correspondence with was Peter Byrne.
Right.
So Peter Byrne created the Bigfoot Information Center in Oregon, and for years, I mean, he's in his 90s now. As of last year, he was like 93. I think he's still alive this year, but sent thought he found evidence of Bigfoot, of a Sasquatch, and wrote the FBI, sent them, the evidence, the hair, the fur, and started this whole thing. But even though the FBI took on the case, tried to contact him, there was some sort of miscommunication, and so Peter Byrne, all these years, just never knew that the FBI had actually taken on this case and had been investigating it until they released the information. So I don't know. I can't imagine being, spending that much of your life researching some anything. I mean,
Mhm.
let alone Bigfoot, and then like in your 90s, finding out that the FBI actually did what you were asking of them.
Right. And it's important to note that in these files, it says that the hairs that were submitted for examination are from the deer family uh, of origin, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Bigfoot didn't exist. It just means that the hairs that were sent in that were believed to be Bigfoot's were ultimately not. So, I mean, if you're a believer in Bigfoot, don't get discouraged. Um, I will actually put a link to the 22 pages of the Bigfoot files, or whatever you want to call them, uh, in the description for this, because, like I said, it's interesting to read through, um, even if you don't believe, because the fact that our U.S. government is actively taking on, these cases of what many believe to be a huge hoax, lends you it kind of tends to make you believe that the FBI somewhat is taking it seriously, you know.
Are
So,
there dates on the items in the report?
give me 1 second and I will look because
I'm
I
curious because so basically the FBI took on the case, um, I think in 1976 is when Peter Byrne sent in the
yes.
sample.
Mhm.
So I'm curious, and I can't remember if they like researched it for a couple of years and then just threw it, in a file and it's been sitting there, or if they've been actively adding information to the file.
It looks like from what I'm seeing here, we've got the latest, or I suppose the most recent file is from March 8th of 1977. That's the
Oh,
most recent correspondence.
hmm. So they basically spent a year gathering information.
Um, roughly.
Yeah.
Let's see, because the earliest is August, I think, of 76. August 26th, 1976. So, what is that? Uh, for 7, 8 months, something like that. 7 or 8 months.
So basically, they did the research, they did the sampling, and then it just kind of went into a folder, a file, and sat there for a number of years.
Yes,
Yeah.
but I think it's also important to note that they didn't release this earlier. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Hmm.
Because if you were to release this in, let's say, 1980 or 1985 or something like that, a few years after the correspondence has ended, it it would have been done, right?
Hmm.
No one would have. People would have probably still reported seeing Bigfoot and been like, "Oh, the FBI is faking it or whatever." But for the most part, it would have fallen off. But to release it in 2019, I think that's a little weird. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it is strange. Like, out of for having had it in their files for so long, and then to choose to release it now is does raise some questions for sure.
I mean, it's kind of like, and it wasn't. It isn't even. It doesn't even seem like this is like one of those freedom of information acts things where what was it like? As soon as Donald Trump took office, he released all those files on the Kennedy assassination.
Hmm.
Right? I don't know if you remember that, but
Hmm.
super boring. Doesn't don't read it. Super boring because half the stuff's redacted anyways. But um, anyways, like it wasn't like someone was just like, you know what, we're just gonna release all this stuff to the public and let them read through it. It was just like a random, like, hey, here you go, kind of thing. Um, I think that is another interesting thing. Um, I don't know.
I'm surprised they even released it at all, to be honest. It's sort of like I don't know.
I
I'm not sure. I I
I
have
I'm
mixed feelings about it.
I'm kind of with you because it doesn't make sense what they hope to gain from releasing it.
Hmm.
Um, it doesn't obviously it doesn't give conclusive evidence that he does or does not exist. So there's still speculation out there. Um, they don't say whether they think he does or does not exist. Um, it's literally just correspondence and newspaper clippings of Bigfoot. Um, so I think the newspaper clippings are the interesting part because unfortunately they're very hard to see being photocopied. I'm
Hmm.
sure if you really wanted to, you could magnify it and uh, read it. But the fact that they took these newspaper clippings out shows that they at least have some level of interest beyond just what this gentleman was asking them to do with researching the um, hair, right? Like that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
okay, but I'm not imagining that.
No.
Another interesting thing. This is off topic, but it wouldn't be a TinBiscuit review if we didn't get off topic a little bit. Um,
Great.
just a few days ago, the government, the Pentagon to be exact, released information regarding UFOs. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I'm looking at that link you sent me. So I don't know. What a strange time for the government to be releasing these items. I don't know. Bigfoot last year, aliens this year. I don't
Yep.
know. Strange things are happening.
Yeah. I mean, one could say that the UFO thing is probably to get our minds off of the coronavirus that we're currently dealing with, but I don't know. I don't think it is.
Let me see that link that you sent.
Which one?
The UFO.
Oh, did I send it to you?
Yeah,
I did. But
CNN.
in regards to Bigfoot, like I said, most of the time when the FBI releases information on a subject or person or thing, um, it typically means that this subject is dead. So, but if we're to
So
believe that, then that means that there was only one Bigfoot, not plenty of Bigfoots across the world. So,
yeah, that's the only thing that I can't like. I think as fun as it is to say like the FBI doesn't release something unless they're dead. Like, I like to believe that it's not just one Sasquatch, it's like its own species, right?
Right.
Especially after that story about the guy being kidnapped, held captive by by a Sasquatch family, and not to mention like the scope of where Bigfoot has actually been sighted, right? Because it's all over the Northwest, essentially.
Right. I mean, it's all over. It's I think most commonly seen in like the Pacific Northwest, so like Oregon, Washington area and stuff like that. But I mean, like I said, it seems like almost every state has its own Bigfoot. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and not even just the United States, it's across the world that their civilizations have stories and sightings of Bigfoot like creatures that they firmly 100% believe. It's deeply ingrained in their culture. So I think it's I don't know. I don't know if I want to get into my personal thoughts on Bigfoot just yet.
No, not yet.
I mean, are you ready to do that? Because I'm ready. I can go.
No, well, I mean, is that like our
No,
final thoughts and review?
I don't think so. But that's what I'm saying. Like, if you're ready for that, I can tell you my thoughts.
Well, I do have an interesting spin-off of the Sasquatch story that I came across.
Okay.
Um, so this one has to do with Yeti, more specifically. So I don't know if you saw this or came across any articles, but let's see, this happened in 2013 or 2014, so not oh, I mean not that long ago, but there was a geneticist from the University of Buffalo who went to the Himalayas to study. Well, she went there to study bears, and so what ended up happening was she got. I can't remember if she asked for it or if she was sort of given these items, but uh, she basically ended up with fur and bone and other items that were supposedly from a Yeti
Hmm.
that she could take and uh, I guess examine, right?
Hmm.
But what ended up happening was after examining all of the hair, I mean, most of it was like, oh, this is from a black bear or a brown bear, in the area.
Hmm.
But there were a couple of samples that actually had similar DNA to polar bears, but there was no exact match.
Hmm.
So this has led them to believe that this could be a new type of bear. I don't know if there's anyone out there thinking, oh, like is the Yeti like a polar bear descendant? I don't know, but kind of the search for these anomalous apes have kind of brought up some other interesting discoveries. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, I think that there's so many undiscovered species out there that maybe it might not be Bigfoot, but it could be something, that people are seeing. Um, and that in turn, I think so. If you were to see an unidentified bear, right? We all know bears can stand on two legs. Maybe you're seeing this unidentified bear and thinking it's Bigfoot, right?
Mhm.
I think that's a very plausible thing to have happened, personally. Um,
Well, I know that I saw there was a picture, supposedly Bigfoot picture. I'm trying to find it, but this guy just put like night vision cameras out in the woods somewhere
mhm.
and got a picture of what he thought was Bigfoot. But then people were saying, "Oh, that's actually an emaciated bear or like the angle of it, but it was not the typical like standing upright kind of posture. It was
Mhm.
definitely, I don't know. So yes, I guess what I'm saying is I think even in the past there have been pictures or supposed, Sasquatch proof that have probably just been bear pictures as well.
Right. I think that's fair. I really do. Um, because to be honest with you, like if I were to, if someone had taken a picture of what they believed to be Bigfoot, right, and it was like you said, like it looked like a bear or something along those lines, something somewhat normal. Um, I probably couldn't tell you what kind of I guarantee I couldn't tell you what kind of bear it was just by looking at a picture or anything, I couldn't tell you anything about it, and that's because I'm a layman, I don't know anything like that. So I think that that also kind of helps the legends of Bigfoot is when people are like, "Hey, I took this picture of this thing. What do you think it is?" And you see it, and you're like, "Okay, well, people are talking about Bigfoot. Maybe it's Bigfoot. Well, maybe it is
Yeah.
Bigfoot, or maybe it's like you said, a bear. You
Mhm.
know, like it. You wouldn't know your ass from a hole in the ground on that
Right.
subject unless you were an expert, and the majority of people are not experts. So how do you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's when you talk about Bigfoot, there's definitely more, I would say, like amateur, Bigfoot hunters, or I guess almost like pseudoscience involved in it, which is a shame because I mean, I think that, I mean, you could say this probably about any urban legend uh, similar to this, but
Mm-hmm.
it's really a shame that there isn't more of a marriage between, you know, these enthusiasts who have dedicated their lives to searching for this creature and real scientists who can come up with that hard data or proof on this. So I don't know. That's always just been kind of sad to me.
Well, I think the reason for that is because a lot of scientists and researchers tend to think along the lines of, okay, well, if I actually go out and look for Bigfoot, people are going to think I'm crazy. But on the flip side of that, if you were to go out and find evidence that there is Bigfoot or some unknown creature that could very well be Bigfoot, right? Think about what it would do for your career. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Um, so I'm with you. I think it's a little bit sad that more people aren't willing to take that risk and potentially find something interesting.
I mean, I think if you say, "Hey, I'm going to go out and look for a Bigfoot proof," yeah, you might sound a little bit crazy,
Wacko.
maybe a little bit wacko. But I mean, you could say the same thing if you're a scientist. I want to go out and find proof of a species that hasn't been discovered yet, and I think that's totally viable, and it's pretty. I mean, it's kind of the same thing, but you're talking about acres and acres of land that's really hard to explore up in the Northwest.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know, it's kind of like this big adventure. There really is I mean, there's a possibility that there could be something living out there because no one is able to reach these remote, you know,
Hmm.
forested areas.
Yeah. I
So I don't
agree.
know.
100%. I agree. Are you ready to give your final thoughts on Bigfoot?
Yeah, I think we can give final thoughts.
All right. Well, you go first.
So I think I'm gonna have to take the stance of, well, kind of what I just explained.
Okay.
I don't know if I specifically believe that Bigfoot exists, but I think that there is the possibility of an unknown or as of yet undiscovered species that could be living out there.
Okay, fair enough.
Just it's sort of like the ocean. There
Right.
are species of fish that we haven't discovered,
Mhm.
and it's sort of the same thing. Like, is there a creature now? Is it a Bigfoot? I don't know. Is it some type of bear that we haven't discovered yet? Maybe. But I mean, I think there's the possibility of creatures existing out there that we don't know of yet.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough. Um, I tend look. I'll be straight with you guys. I believe in Bigfoot. Um, I think that to all these researchers and people, I wouldn't really call these. I wouldn't call the amateurs researchers. Enthusiasts. We'll call them
Yes.
enthusiasts. These Bigfoot enthusiasts and researchers that go out and they look for Bigfoot, and they're like, oh well, we're gonna place these traps, these like night vision cameras, and um, we're going to uh, play this music, or not the music, but this quote unquote Bigfoot yell that you see so common in these Bigfoot hunting shows. Like, I think you're pretty proud of yourself if you think that something that has not been formally seen, right, and researched to death um, for the past, I don't know, hundreds of years, right? If you think that you're going to go walk out in the woods and see it, uh, you got another thing coming. Think that Bigfoot is like those shirts that you see often say he's the hide and seek champion of the world, right?
Right.
He's super good at blending in. He knows where he can and can't go. He knows where humans aren't going to be able to get to, but he can because he's, sort of almost ape like. Um, I think that, like you said, there's so much of the earth that we haven't discovered yet because we physically can't get there on the ground, like with boots on the ground. We might be able to fly over, but just because we can fly over it doesn't mean we're going to catch everything. Um, I think that you, much the same as aliens, you have to be pretty proud of yourself to think that you're like the only thing. You know what I mean? Um, so to say that you are 100% right and that Bigfoot does not exist, I disagree. I I think he's out there, and I think that people have probably seen him, and I think that the people that are hoaxing it want to be a part of the group that has seen him, and or they want to discredit the ones that have seen him by saying, "Oh, look, it was a hoax," you know,
Yeah. Or they just want the fame.
or that, yeah, could be that. I mean, I think that if he's had years and years of practice of hiding and not being seen, that he's he's damn good at it, and you're not going to catch him with a simple night vision camera and a couple sticks that you're banging
Right.
together.
Yeah.
So that's just my thoughts. Um, I don't know. I hope he's real. I really do. I really hope he's real because it's really fun to talk about Bigfoot to me. I don't know.
So one thing that we didn't touch on in this episode, and I'll kind of leave it open. You may know about this. I actually don't know a whole lot about it,
Okay.
but psychic Sasquatch.
Okay.
Have you heard about that?
I've heard it, but I do not know it.
Okay. I That's something that I want to dive into because I came across it in my research, and I mean, I think it's pretty much exactly what it sounds. Sasquatch with the psychic powers. So I'm not quite sure about that. I would have to say that that's something that I can say that I probably don't believe in.
Okay.
But
Fair. I think that's fair.
something interesting to maybe look into.
I think that's fair. Yeah. But I'm down for that. I'm down for that.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
I don't know. What's next? Are we gonna do UFOs since the government just released that stuff?
we could, yeah.
We could.
That that would be a topical topic.
Yeah, right. It would be topical, and we would cross two things that we said we would never talk about off the list, so people could stop
Yep,
asking about them. Um,
Bigfoot and aliens.
Also, I mean, honestly, we were gonna do tonight, guys. We were gonna do Disneyland and Disney World, like the parks conspiracies, but a lot of them have to do with dead people, and they just read more like creepypastas than they are
Yeah,
conspiracy theories. But don't you worry, I have a friend who works at Disney World, and I reached out, and they're gonna get back to me about some that they have heard of being an employee for Disney. So
nice. We
that
get the
could be
inside scoop.
right. It could be an inside scoop, and it'd be really fun. Um, but yeah, yeah,
Well,
aliens.
I can say that I thoroughly enjoyed our Sasquatch
A lot
conversation. I
more than
didn't
you
think I
thought you
would.
would.
I know I didn't think I would, but I did, and I can say that I'm a little fonder of Bigfoot
A lot
now.
more than you thought you would. Don't
Yeah.
worry though, because for UFOs, we can get we can get really big into it.
Okay.
We can get big into it. I'm excited. I'm excited. For those of you that don't know, a couple days ago, the UFO or the Pentagon released information. Uh, they released video footage of UFOs, um, and or sorry, unidentified aerial something. I can't remember the third word, but it's something. Um, so that's interesting. That again, they release it at such a weird time. Why now? You know, we've been asking for people have been seeing aliens and asking about aliens for the longest time, and yet now, after all this time, they decide to release something. So that's an interesting topic. But I have nothing
Yep.
else.
No, I think that wraps up our Bigfoot fact or fake discussion.
All right, that's awesome.
And
Yes,
I'm looking forward to our alien talk next.
I am
In
too,
that
and
much.
I'm also looking forward to Disney because I think there's some weird shit going on at Disney. Pardon my language. I think there's some weird stuff going on at Disney, and because there's been talks that just a brief blurb, right? Is anytime uh like someone speaks out about Disney and saying that like, oh, this shady stuff happens at Disney, they like cease and desist them. They're like, you need to stop. So that's interesting. Just saying. I don't know.
Disney is scary. The
Disney
amount of
is,
power they wield
and people are fine with
is
it.
frightening.
That's the thing. People are fine with it. They're like, yeah, please, Disney, please have a monopoly on everything. Um, I'm okay with that. Like, no, maybe don't give them that kind of power, but
Too
sure,
much power.
whatever. Like they own part of baseball, like the MLB. They have like a partnership with baseball.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, 100%. They have Disney princess nights where like people dressed up like the princesses go to the parks and stuff. It's why
I'm sure they've got their hands into all sorts of stuff that I
they
am
do.
not aware of.
I guarantee they do.
Yeah.
It's crazy, but that's another episode. Another episode.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you, Tin Man, for this wonderful Bigfoot discussion.
I appreciate you
And
being my co-host tonight.
yeah, of course. And thank you, chat, for hanging out and listening to us discuss.
Yeah, it's always
Um,
appreciative that you guys stop by and chat it up with us. So, other than that, Biscuit, I have nothing else. Like I said, I appreciate you being my co-host, and talk to you later.
all right. Sounds good. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.